In a world where whispers of ancient power danced among the mountains, there lived a man named Liang. He was not just any man, he was a giant among mortals, a being whose strength was unparalleled. He could lift mountains as if they were mere pebbles, his sinewy arms capable of reshaping the very landscape of the earth. But with this immense power came an equally great burden. Every time he unleashed his strength, he felt the threads of his life fray, the years he had left slip away like grains of sand in an hourglass. Liang made his home in a secluded valley, cradled by towering peaks and lush greenery, a paradise untouched by the chaos of civilization. Here, he could be at peace, away from the judgment of those who would fear him. As he roamed the mountains, he often marveled at the beauty around him, the rustling leaves, the songs of distant birds, the shimmering rivers. But in the back of his mind, a shadow loomed, whispering doubts and fears he could not ignore. The tranquility of his life shattered one fateful day. As Liang stood at the edge of a precipice, gazing at the horizon, the air around him thickened with a palpable tension. Dark clouds gathered overhead, swirling ominously. Nature itself seemed to tremble. He closed his eyes, feeling the energy in the air shift, and then he heard it, a low, rumbling sound, like thunder rolling across the sky. It was a sound that carried a weight of despair, a herald of doom. He hurried to the ancient texts he had studied for years, dusty scrolls that held the wisdom of his ancestors. They spoke of an entity known as Xian, a cosmic force capable of destruction on a scale that no being could withstand. Xian was awakening, and it sought to consume the world, to snuff out all life in a single breath. Panic surged through Liang as he pieced together the implications of this revelation. The world was in peril, and he had the power to stop it. But at what cost? Days passed as chaos erupted across the globe. Earthquakes shook cities to their foundations, storms ravaged coastlines, and the sky darkened as if the very sun had lost its way. Liang watched from his mountaintop, torn between his desire to intervene and the heavy price he would pay. He could not bear the thought of watching the world burn, yet every moment he hesitated drew him closer to his own demise. Finally, the weight of his indecision became unbearable. Liang set out to find others like him, those with powers that could aid him in this dire hour. He ventured into the depths of the ancient woods, where shadows danced and the air was thick with magic. It was here he sought out the few remaining powered beings, hidden from humanity, wary of the devastation that might arise if they were discovered. The first he found was Jean, a healer whose touch could mend even the deepest wounds. She was gathering herbs in a sun-dappled glade, her hands gentle and sure. Liang approached with trepidation, his heart pounding in his chest. "Jean," he called softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned, her eyes wide with recognition and concern. "Liang," she said, stepping closer. "You've come for help, haven't you?" He nodded, feeling the weight of his power pressing down on him. "Xian is coming. We must prepare." Jin's expression darkened, and Liang saw the fear flicker in her eyes. "You know what that means, don't you? The cost of using our abilities. It could mean your life." "I can't stand by and do nothing," he replied, his voice resolute. "Not while the world is in danger." Together, they sought out the others, a sage named Mei, who had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, and a warrior named Kiran, whose heart burned with a fierce desire for glory. The four of them gathered in a clearing beneath the boughs of ancient trees, each bringing their own strengths and fears to the table. As they discussed their plan, the atmosphere crackled with tension. Kiran was quick to argue for an aggressive approach, eager to confront Xian head-on. "We should meet this force in battle, show it the strength of our powers," he urged, his fists clenched in determination. Mei, however, cautioned against such recklessness. Power without wisdom is a dangerous thing, Kiran. We need to understand what we are up against before we act. Liang listened to their debate, feeling the conflicting tides of his own thoughts. He understood the allure of power, the desire to wield it fearlessly. Yet, he was haunted by the knowledge of what it had cost him in the past. Every time he had used his strength, he felt a piece of himself slip away, and now, with Xian looming, he could not afford any missteps. Jin's voice cut through the tension, soft yet firm. We must find a balance. We have the strength to confront this force, but we must also be prepared to sacrifice ourselves if it comes to that. Liang, you know this better than anyone. The truth of her words weighed heavily on him. He had always felt alone in his struggle, but now, surrounded by allies, he felt the stirrings of hope. Together, they could prepare, could strategize, could confront Xian with a united front. Days turned into weeks as they trained, honing their abilities under the watchful eye of nature. Liang pushed himself to the brink, testing the limits of his strength while remaining acutely aware of the cost. With every mountain he lifted, he felt the years of his life drain away, but the thought of failure kept him going. Each time they faced the trials of training, he felt the bond with his allies deepen. They shared laughter, fears, and moments of vulnerability, forging a camaraderie that transcended their individual struggles. As they practiced, Jean often came to him, her gentle presence a soothing balm. "You carry the weight of the world on your shoulders," she would say, placing a hand on his arm. "But you are not alone. We are in this together." Her words resonated with him, yet doubt lingered in the corners of his mind. The day of reckoning drew closer, and with it, the realization that he might have to pay the ultimate price. He found himself gazing at the sky, watching the clouds swirl ominously, wondering if he could bear the burden of sacrifice. Finally, the day arrived. The sky crackled with energy, and a deep rumble echoed in the air. They stood together on the edge of a vast plain, where the earth met the horizon. As Xian descended, the landscape twisted and warped, colors swirling in a cosmic ballet of destruction. The being was a dark mass, pulsating with an otherworldly light, and as it approached, the very ground beneath them trembled. "Stay strong," Liang shouted, his heart racing. He could feel the energy surging within him, but the realization of what lay ahead gripped him with icy fingers. This would be a battle unlike any other, and he could not allow fear to hold him back. They charged forward, a united front against the darkness. Liang unleashed his power, lifting boulders and hurling them at Xian, the energy flowing through him like a tempest. But with each use, he felt himself weakening, the toll becoming unbearable. His allies fought valiantly by his side, their powers intertwining in a dazzling display of strength, but Xian was relentless. It retaliated with waves of energy that knocked them back, scattering them across the battlefield. Liang felt despair creeping in as he watched his friend struggle against the force. Kiran, fierce and determined, fought bravely but was quickly overpowered. Mei summoned ancient magic to shield them, but the darkness seeped through, corrupting everything it touched. As Liang witnessed the struggle of his allies, the weight of his choices crashed down upon him. This was the moment he had dreaded. He could save them, but it would cost him everything. He felt the years of his life slipping away with each powerful strike he unleashed, and yet, deep within him, a flicker of resolve ignited. "Together," he roared, the words bursting from his lips like a rallying cry. "We must fight together." As the cosmic energy surged around them, he channeled every ounce of strength he possessed. He felt his life force dwindling, but he pushed through the pain, knowing that his sacrifice could mean salvation for the world. The air crackled with power as he gathered his allies, intertwining their abilities into a single, powerful force. In that moment, he saw the faces of those he fought for, the children, the elders, the people of the world who had never known the fear of such darkness. He would not let it take them. With a final surge of strength, he unleashed the full extent of his power, a blinding light that engulfed everything in its path. The explosion of energy was both magnificent and terrifying. As the light consumed him, Liang felt his life slip away, yet in that moment of transcendence, he knew he had made the right choice. He had chosen to stand for something greater than himself, to become a beacon of hope in a world filled with despair. As the brilliance faded, so too did Liang. The darkness that was Xian dissipated, unraveling into nothingness, and the world around them began to heal. The skies cleared, the earth calmed, and the remnants of chaos gave way to a tranquil beauty. In the aftermath, Jean, Kiran, and Mei stood in the silence, the weight of their loss heavy in the air. They looked around, witnessing the dawn of a new era, one that Liang had sacrificed everything to create. Tears filled Jin's eyes as she felt the absence of her friend, the giant who had given his all for the world. Kiran's voice broke the stillness, filled with a mix of grief and reverence. We must honor his memory. He gave us everything. Yes, Mei agreed, her voice steady. We carry his legacy forward. We will use our powers wisely, not just for ourselves, but for all. In the weeks that followed, the world began to heal, and so did they. The mountains stood tall, the rivers flowed with renewed vigor, and the people learned to respect the power of nature and the beings that protected them. The sacrifice of Liang became a tale woven into the fabric of their lives, a reminder of the strength that lay in unity, in selflessness. Jean often found herself wandering to the peak where Liang had stood, gazing at the horizon. There, she felt his presence, the echo of his spirit guiding her. She knew that he would always be with them, a guardian in the hearts of those who remembered. In time, they rebuilt what had been lost, forging a new path forward, forever changed by the sacrifice of the giant who had chosen the world over himself. The legacy of Liang, the king of giants, lived on in every act of kindness, every moment of courage, and every breath taken in a world that now thrived in harmony. In the weeks that followed Liang's sacrifice, the world began to adjust to a new normal. Nature, ever resilient, started to mend the wounds inflicted by Xian's darkness. The mountains that had once been his refuge now stood as monuments to his strength and selflessness, their peaks kissed by the soft light of dawn. Communities banded together, united in their resolve to honor the legacy of the giant who had saved them. Jean, Kiran, and Mei formed a council, a gathering of the powered beings who had fought alongside Liang. Their mission was clear: to educate humanity about the delicate balance of power and responsibility, to ensure that no one would have to bear the weight of such sacrifice alone again. They traveled from village to village, sharing stories of Liang's bravery, urging people to respect the forces of nature and the magic that surrounded them. On one of these journeys, they arrived at a small settlement nestled in a valley. The villagers greeted them with a mix of awe and trepidation. Jean stepped forward, her voice soothing and inviting. "We come in peace," she said, "to share a message of hope and unity. We are here to learn from you and to teach you what we know." The villagers listened intently as Kiran recounted the tale of Liang, his voice rising with passion. He was not just a giant in strength, Kiran emphasized. He was a giant in spirit. His sacrifice teaches us that true power lies in our ability to protect and uplift one another. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the gathering, the villagers shared their own stories of struggle and resilience. They spoke of the destruction wrought by the storms, of the fear that had gripped their hearts as Xian approached. But they also shared tales of courage, of neighbors helping neighbors, of finding strength in community. Jean felt a stirring in her heart as she listened. It reminded her of the bond she had shared with Liang, the way he had inspired those around him to see beyond themselves. "We must carry that spirit forward," she said, her eyes shining with determination. "We are not just protectors, we are stewards of this world. We must nurture it and each other." The council spent the night with the villagers, sharing food and laughter, weaving a tapestry of connection that transcended their differences. As the fire crackled and the stars twinkled overhead, Jean felt a sense of peace wash over her. Liang's spirit was alive in their discussions, in the laughter and camaraderie that echoed around the fire. It was a testament to his legacy, a reminder that his sacrifice had not been in vain. Days turned into weeks, and their travels continued. They visited cities, forests, and shores, spreading their message far and wide. With each place they touched, they noticed a shift, a growing awareness among people of the importance of balance, respect, and responsibility. Children listened wide-eyed as Kiran recounted tales of their adventures, while adults shared their own insights and experiences. Yet, even as they celebrated their achievements, a lingering shadow loomed in the back of Jin's mind. She had felt it during their travels, a restless energy that hinted at unease. The whispers of power that had once seemed so distant now stirred, igniting a sense of urgency she couldn't ignore. They had faced Xian, but the universe was vast, and threats could arise from anywhere. One evening, as they camped beneath a canopy of stars, Jean sat alone, lost in thought. The night was peaceful, but her heart was heavy. She sensed the world was still healing, and while hope was blossoming, so too was the potential for darkness to resurface. She felt a familiar presence beside her and turned to find Mei sitting quietly. "Something troubles you," Mei observed, her voice gentle. Jean sighed, feeling the weight of her worries. "I can't shake the feeling that we're not done yet. There are still forces out there, waiting for their moment." Mei nodded, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "You are wise to be vigilant. The balance of power is fragile, and we must be prepared to protect what we've built." "But how?" Jean asked, her voice tinged with frustration. "We can't be everywhere at once. What if another threat arises? What if someone else seeks power at the expense of others?" Mei placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We'll create a network. We can teach others to be guardians, to respect the forces they wield. It starts with education, with instilling the values Liang embodied." In that moment, Jean felt a spark of inspiration. "You're right. If we can spread the message of unity and responsibility, we can empower others to act when danger arises. We can't predict the future, but we can prepare for it." The next day, they set forth with renewed purpose. Their council began to take shape, a network of allies who understood the gravity of their mission. They reached out to others with powers, gathering those who had hidden themselves away. They encouraged open dialogue, shared training sessions, and a commitment to vigilance. As the months rolled on, they formed a coalition, a diverse group of beings and humans united by a common cause. They traveled further afield, seeking out those who wielded magic and strength, fostering connections that would bolster their resolve. The world was becoming a tapestry of guardians, each thread interwoven with the shared belief that they were stronger together. One day, during a gathering at a great oak in a clearing, a newcomer approached the council. He was a tall figure, cloaked in dark robes that fluttered like shadows in the breeze. His eyes held a spark of mischief, and his presence commanded attention. "I've heard whispers of your coalition," he said, his voice smooth yet unsettling. "And I must admit, I'm intrigued." Jean stepped forward, her heart racing. "Who are you?" she asked, wary but curious. "I am Rylan," he introduced himself, a sly smile playing on his lips. "I have abilities of my own, and I've been watching you. What do you want?" Kieran interjected, protective instincts flaring. "Only to offer my assistance," Rylan replied, his tone laced with charm. "You seek to unify and strengthen. I, too, wish to see the balance maintained." May eyed him suspiciously. "And what do you gain from this?" "Knowledge, perhaps," he answered, tilting his head as if weighing his words. "And power. We live in a world teeming with potential, and it would be a shame to let it go to waste." Jean exchanged glances with her allies. The atmosphere thickened with tension as they considered Rylan's offer. "What do you really want, Rylan?" she asked, her voice steady despite the unease creeping into her chest. Straight to the point, he chuckled, a hint of admiration in his eyes. "Very well. I seek an alliance, a partnership. The world is changing, and those who don't adapt will be left behind. I can help you strengthen your coalition, bring others to your cause. But I ask for a place among you, to be heard and valued." The council members shared uncertain looks. It was a tempting offer, but something about Rylan's demeanor sent warning signals through Jin's mind. She could sense an undercurrent of ambition, a desire for influence that felt insidious. "Before we consider your offer," Jean said carefully, "we need to understand your true intentions. Trust is not given lightly." "Wise of you," Rylan conceded, his eyes glinting with interest. "But understand this, the world is vast, and threats are not always what they seem. You may find my insights invaluable, should you choose to accept." Over the next few days, Rylan remained near the council, sharing stories of his own journeys, of forces he had encountered, and of battles he had fought. His tales were riveting, filled with dark intrigue and narrow escapes, and they captivated many of the council members. But Jean remained skeptical, cautious of the charm that cloaked his true motivations. As they prepared for a larger gathering to welcome new members to their coalition, Jean decided to confront Rylan privately. She found him leaning against a tree, his expression contemplative, as if he were weighing the world itself. "Why do you really want to join us?" she asked, cutting through the silence. He looked up, his smile disarming. "Because, dear Jean, power is best served with allies. I have seen the darkness that lurks beyond the horizon, and I want to be on the right side of history." "Or on the side that best serves your own interests," she countered, unwavering in her scrutiny. Rylan's demeanor shifted, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. "You think I'm seeking to manipulate you? I'm simply offering an opportunity. A chance to be part of something greater." "Greater?" she echoed. "Or just more chaotic? You speak of darkness, but what if you are that very darkness in disguise?" "Perhaps," he admitted, a smirk returning to his lips. "But then, we all wear masks in this world. I'm merely proposing we work together, and that includes being honest about our ambitions." Jean took a step back, evaluating him. "If we were to accept you, it would be on our terms. We are not interested in power for power's sake." "Then consider this my invitation to evolve," he said smoothly. "What you have created is remarkable, but the world is changing rapidly. Adapting to those changes requires more than just ideals, it requires strength and cunning." Before she could respond, Kieran approached, sensing the tension. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, his protective instincts flaring again. "Just a friendly discussion," Rylan said, his tone light and unbothered. "I was sharing my insights with Jean. It's always good to exchange ideas." Kieran narrowed his eyes at Rylan, clearly unimpressed. "We'll need time to consider your proposal. Of course, Rylan replied, his expression unyielding. I wouldn't expect anything less. As the days passed, Jean felt the pressure mounting. Rylan's presence was both a curiosity and a threat, stirring up divisions within the coalition. Some were drawn to his charisma and tales, while others echoed Jin's concerns, wary of the potential for deception. During a council meeting, the air crackled with tension. We should embrace his offer, one of the members argued, enthusiasm shining in their eyes. His knowledge could bolster our strength. Or lead us into a trap, Jean interjected, her voice steady. We cannot lose sight of our purpose. We stand for unity, not ambition. As discussions swirled, May raised her hand, demanding silence. We must not rush into this. Rylan's charm can be deceiving. We need to remain true to our values, and that means being cautious about whom we trust. Kieran, caught in the midst of the debate, finally spoke up. If we decide to move forward, we need to set boundaries. If Rylan is truly sincere, he will respect them. The council agreed to maintain a careful distance from Rylan while continuing their outreach efforts. They planned another gathering, this time inviting individuals who were strong in both spirit and heart, people who understood the weight of responsibility. As they prepared, Jean felt a mixture of anticipation and dread. The world was healing, but it was also fragile, and she feared that Rylan's presence might tip the balance. She resolved to remain vigilant, to protect what they had built together, no matter the cost. On the day of the gathering, the clearing was abuzz with energy. People from distant lands traveled to witness the council's efforts, each bringing their own stories, their own powers, and their own hopes for a brighter future. Jean stood at the front, heart racing with excitement, ready to share the spirit of unity that had blossomed from Liang's sacrifice. As they began to speak, Rylan lingered on the edges, watching with an intensity that unsettled her. His presence felt like a storm brewing in the distance, a reminder that darkness could come in many forms. Welcome. Jean greeted the crowd, her voice carrying over the rustling leaves. We gather today not just to celebrate our power, but to embrace our shared responsibility. Together, we can shape a world where strength is wielded with compassion, where we uplift one another rather than seek dominance. The crowd responded with cheers, their spirits high. Jean continued, sharing the story of Liang, weaving a tapestry of bravery and sacrifice that resonated deeply with everyone present. She felt the energy in the air shift, a collective hope igniting among the crowd, but as she spoke, she couldn't shake the feeling of Rylan's gaze upon her. It was a weight that pressed down on her, a reminder that not all who stood among them shared their ideals. She cast a glance in his direction, meeting his eyes for a brief moment, and in that instant, she saw a flicker of something she couldn't quite place, a hunger, perhaps, masked by charm. The gathering progressed with laughter and stories, a vibrant exchange of ideas and hopes for the future. But Rylan's influence loomed like a shadow, tugging at the edges of the celebration. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the clearing in a golden hue, Jean felt a ripple of unease. After the gathering, as the crowd began to disperse, Rylan approached Jean, his demeanor casual yet predatory. You have quite the talent for inspiring others, he remarked, an edge of admiration tinged with something darker. What do you want, Rylan? She asked, unable to mask her wariness. Just to observe, he replied, leaning against a nearby tree. Your message is powerful, but it is also naive. People crave more than just ideals, they crave results. I can help you achieve that. Jean crossed her arms, resisting the urge to step back. We are not interested in shortcuts. We believe in genuine change. But genuine change often requires a bit of ruthlessness, he countered, a glimmer of challenge in his eyes. What if I told you that there are forces out there, even darker than Cien, gathering strength? Would you still cling to your ideals, or would you be willing to do what it takes to protect your people? Her heart raced, but she stood firm. We will protect our people, but not at the cost of our values. That is the lesson we learned from Liang. Ryland smiled, a hint of mischief dancing in his eyes. You're more like him than you realize. But remember, the world is not as simple as you hope. Sometimes, survival demands a different kind of strength. Jean turned away, refusing to engage further. She had heard enough. The taste of unease lingered in her mouth, and she felt the weight of her responsibility intensifying. She gathered her allies, sharing her concerns about Rylan and the potential for discord within their coalition. We must remain united, she urged. If we allow ambition to cloud our judgment, we risk everything Liang fought for. As the days unfolded, they continued their outreach, but Ryland's influence crept in like a shadow, stirring unease among the council. Some began to admire him, drawn in by his charisma and stories of power. Jean felt the fracture grow, a rift between those who clung to their values and those who saw Ryland as a means to an end. Determined to confront this fracture, Jean called for an urgent meeting, inviting everyone to discuss the potential direction of their coalition. The atmosphere was charged with tension as they gathered in the clearing once more, a mix of eager faces and wary expressions. I appreciate all of you coming, she began, her voice steady despite the swirling emotions. We stand at a crossroads. Our coalition is strong, but Ryland's presence has caused divisions. We need to decide what path we will take. Kieran stood beside her, his brow furrowed. We've accomplished so much together, but we can't ignore the allure of power. Ryland offers us opportunities that we might not find elsewhere. And at what cost? Jean interjected. We've seen the consequences of unchecked ambition. If we abandon our principles, we risk becoming the very thing we stand against. Voices rose in the crowd, opinions clashing as uncertainty rippled through the group. Some argued in favor of Ryland's vision, while others echoed Jin's warnings. The tension reached a boiling point, and for a moment, Jean feared the coalition would splinter. Then May raised her hand, her calm voice cutting through the discord. Let's not forget why we came together in the first place. We fought for balance, for protection, and for the legacy of Liang. If we lose sight of that, we will not only fail ourselves, but we will fail him. Her words struck a chord, and the atmosphere shifted. Jean felt a renewed sense of purpose, the weight of uncertainty beginning to lift. We must define our values clearly, she said, her voice rising above the murmurs. We will not allow ambition to overshadow our mission. We stand for unity, responsibility, and the protection of our world. Gradually, the crowd began to settle, and agreement echoed in their nods and murmurs. Together, they reaffirmed their commitment to the values that had brought them together. They would not be swayed by the seductive call of power. Instead, they would strengthen their resolve to foster genuine connection and growth. As the meeting concluded, Jean felt a sense of relief wash over her. The coalition had withstood the test, and they had emerged stronger, united in their purpose. Yet, in the back of her mind, Ryland's words echoed like an ominous warning. The world was indeed vast, and shadows still loomed on the horizon. Days turned into weeks, and the coalition continued to grow. More powered beings joined their ranks, each adding their own stories, talents, and insights. They trained together, learning from one another, strengthening their bonds and expanding their reach. The sense of community flourished, and Jean felt a renewed sense of hope for the future. but just as they began to settle into a rhythm, a new threat emerged. Reports trickled in from the far reaches of the world, strange disturbances in nature, dark forces rising, echoes of something sinister gathering strength. Jean felt her heart race as she listened to the tales, the weight of responsibility heavy upon her. "We need to investigate," she declared, determination fueling her resolve. "We can't ignore these warnings. If there's a threat, we must confront it head-on." As they set out on their journey, Jean felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation. They traveled through dense forests and across rugged mountains, following the signs of disturbance. Each step took them deeper into the heart of an unsettling mystery, and with each passing day, the sense of urgency grew. Finally, they arrived at a village that had been ravaged by strange storms. The villagers spoke of dark figures seen at the edge of the forest, whispers of power that seemed to twist the very fabric of nature. Jean felt a chill run down her spine. This was more than mere disturbance, it was a manifestation of something dark and powerful. As they prepared to investigate, Rylan appeared at their side, a glint of curiosity in his eyes. "I see you're diving into the heart of the storm," he remarked, an edge of amusement in his tone. Jean shot him a glare, her patience wearing thin. "This is not a game, Rylan. People are suffering." "Of course," he replied, unfazed. "But sometimes suffering is the catalyst for change. You'll see." They pressed on, entering the forest that surrounded the village. The air was thick with tension, and the trees loomed like sentinels, shadows dancing in the fading light. As they ventured deeper, the signs of disturbance became more pronounced. Trees twisted unnaturally, the ground cracked as if in pain. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the trees, reverberating in the silence. Jin's heart raced as she turned to her allies. "Stay close," she instructed, her senses heightened. "We don't know what we're dealing with." In the clearing ahead, they spotted figures moving between the trees, dark shapes that seemed to ripple with energy. As they drew closer, the truth revealed itself, a gathering of beings, each radiating a menacing power that sent a wave of dread coursing through Jean. "Who are they?" Kieran whispered, his voice barely audible. "Looks like we found our threat," May replied, her eyes narrowing. "We need to approach with caution." Rylan stepped forward, an unsettling grin on his face. "Allow me," he said, striding into the clearing as if he were wading through a calm sea. "Wait." Jean called, but it was too late. Rylan moved with an audacity that left her breathless. He approached the dark figures, confidence radiating from him like a beacon. "Ah, fellow seekers of power," he exclaimed, his tone almost playful. "What an interesting gathering we have here." The dark figures turned, revealing twisted features and eyes that glinted with malice. Jean felt her blood run cold as she realized the true nature of this gathering. They were beings drawn to darkness, attracted by the allure of power and the promise of chaos. "Rylan, come back," she shouted, but he was already engaging them, his charm masking the danger that lingered beneath the surface. Jin's heart raced as she watched the confrontation unfold, a mixture of fear and anger bubbling within her. One of the dark figures stepped forward, a smirk playing on its lips. "What do we have here?" "A curious little group, led by a foolish dreamer." "Foolish?" Rylan retorted, his voice smooth. "I'm merely exploring the possibilities. After all, power is best when it is shared, don't you agree?" Jin's heart sank as she realized Rylan was flirting with danger, potentially sealing their fate with his reckless words. "Rylan, we need to retreat," she urged, desperation creeping into her voice. But Rylan ignored her, clearly reveling in the exchange. "I can see the allure of what you seek," he continued, eyes glimmering with mischief. You've gathered quite the following. Perhaps we can strike a deal." The dark figures exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from curiosity to amusement. "And what would you offer?" one asked, voice dripping with mockery. "Knowledge, power, and a chance to redefine the balance," Rylan said, his words seductive. "Together, we can forge a new path." Jean felt a surge of panic. "Rylan, this isn't the way," she shouted, but her voice was lost in the growing tension. The leader of the dark figures stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "Your offer is tempting, but we've no need for traitors among us." In an instant, chaos erupted. The dark figures lunged, shadows twisting and forming into grotesque shapes, while Rylan sprang back, realizing too late the trap he had walked into. Jean felt the pulse of energy around her, the air thickening as she rallied her allies. "Defend yourselves," she cried, her heart pounding. As the battle began, Jean fought with everything she had, drawing on the strength of her allies. Kieran and May stood by her side, their powers intertwining, creating a barrier against the dark onslaught. But Rylan was a wild card, darting in and out of danger, his intentions unclear as he swung between ally and adversary. The clash reverberated through the forest, a cacophony of power and chaos. Jean could feel the darkness pressing in, threatening to consume everything they had built. "We have to push back," she shouted, focusing her energy. Together, with a surge of strength, they formed a unified front, channeling their powers into a brilliant wave that pushed against the darkness. The figures faltered, momentarily stunned by the force of their unity. It was a reminder of the bond they shared, the strength that came from standing together. But Rylan, caught up in the chaos, seized the opportunity to make a last-ditch effort. He stepped forward, channeling his own energy, and in that moment, Jean realized he was attempting to bargain with the dark figures, trying to negotiate their escape. "No," she cried out, horror filling her voice. "This isn't what we stand for." But it was too late. Rylan's words hung in the air, a twisted promise of power that threatened to unravel everything they had fought for. The dark figures paused, intrigued, their expressions shifting as they considered his offer. In a flash, the tide of the battle shifted. The dark figures surged forward, emboldened by the prospect of Rylan's allegiance. Jean felt a wave of despair wash over her as they pressed against her defenses, their shadows threatening to overwhelm. "Rylan, stop," she yelled, desperation clawing at her throat. "You're making a mistake." But Rylan laughed, a sound that echoed eerily through the chaos. "Mistakes are often the path to greater power, my dear. You'll see." With a fierce determination, Jean and her allies rallied, pushing back against the darkness. They fought with every ounce of strength, their resolve shining bright against the encroaching shadows. Together, they wove a barrier of light, standing firm against the tide. In that moment, something shifted within Jean. She remembered Liang's sacrifice, the lessons he had imparted. "We are more than our power," she shouted, rallying her friends. "We stand for unity, for the protection of our world." With renewed vigor, they channeled their energy into a single pulse, a radiant wave that surged through the clearing. The dark figures faltered, their shadows retreating as the light engulfed them. It was a testament to their strength, a reminder that true power lay in unity, not ambition. As the last echoes of the dark figures faded into the night, Jean felt a weight lift from her shoulders. They had stood together against the darkness, their bonds unyielding. But Rylan's betrayal hung heavily in the air, a bitter reminder of the fragility of trust. "What have you done?" Kieran turned to Rylan, anger simmering in his voice. "You almost led us to destruction." Rylan shrugged, an air of nonchalance clinging to him. I was merely exploring options. Sometimes, the only way to understand power is to confront it head-on. You put us all at risk, Jean said, stepping closer, her voice low but firm. We cannot afford to let ambition cloud our judgment. But isn't ambition what drives us? Rylan replied, a hint of challenge in his tone. What if power is the only way to ensure our survival? Jean shook her head, anger simmering beneath the surface. We've seen what happens when power is wielded without responsibility. We are not conquerors, we are guardians. Our purpose is to protect, not dominate. Rylan's expression shifted, a flicker of something darker crossing his features. You're naive, Jean. The world is not as simple as you wish it to be. I thought you were better than that. With those words, he turned away, slipping into the shadows of the forest, leaving the council members standing in stunned silence. Jean felt a chill run down her spine, a sense of foreboding that lingered in the air. What do we do now? May asked, her voice steady but filled with concern. We regroup, Jean replied, determination fueling her resolve. We need to fortify our defenses and remain vigilant. Rylan may have underestimated us, but we can't afford to underestimate him. As they made their way back to the village, the weight of Rylan's betrayal hung heavily on Jin's heart. The shadows of doubt crept in, whispering reminders of the danger that lurked just beyond their vision. They had faced darkness before, but this time felt different. The world was changing, and they needed to adapt. In the days that followed, they poured their energy into fortifying their coalition. They trained tirelessly, honing their powers, but they also reached out to the villagers, ensuring they felt protected and valued. The bond between the council and the communities grew stronger, a testament to their resilience, yet, the specter of Rylan loomed large, a shadow they couldn't shake. Jean felt a constant unease, a sense that the darkness he had flirted with was not far behind. Whispers of disturbances continued to circulate, strange happenings that hinted at a brewing storm. One night, as the council gathered to discuss their next steps, a messenger arrived, breathless and frantic. It's Rylan, the messenger gasped. He's rallying a force, a dark alliance. He seeks to unite those drawn to power. Jean felt her heart drop. We have to stop him, she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. If he's gathering strength, we cannot allow it to grow. With urgency, they began strategizing, determined to confront Rylan and the darkness he was courting. But deep down, Jean felt a pang of regret. Rylan had once been an ally, a potential source of strength, but now he stood as a looming threat, a reminder of how easily trust could be shattered. As they prepared for the inevitable confrontation, Jean reflected on the lessons they had learned through their journey. It was not just about power, it was about unity, responsibility, and the strength that came from standing together against the darkness. With resolve, they set out to confront Rylan, ready to protect their coalition and the values they held dear. The path ahead was uncertain, but Jean knew one thing: they would face the shadows together, drawing strength from one another as they fought for the future they believed in.